Hey friend, today's podcast is part of a pre-recorded series we recorded right from the cruise ship on our vacation. We wanted to take you along for the ride as we show how to blend our faith into our everyday. Hey friend, welcome to Everyday Imperfect, the podcast for busy people with imperfect faith. I'm Tabatha Ruiz, pastor's wife, mom, author, speaker, and a very imperfect believer in Jesus. I've had to wrestle through some pretty dark times in my faith, all while keeping that mask of perfection in place. Till finally I realized that having faith doesn't mean that you don't have doubts or questions. Just because we have doubts and questions does not make us less of a Christian. It means we are a Christian with questions. And you know what? It's okay to have imperfect faith. We have a perfect God after all. So if your faith needs a little boost today, crank those AirPods up and borrow a cup of imperfect faith from us today. Let's go. Hey friend, welcome to Everyday Imperfect. This is a special edition. We are doing this from our vacation, which I know may sound weird to some of you guys, but hey, we enjoy doing this and we have time, just the two of us, so we're doing it on our vacation. So Everyday Imperfect for this episode is coming to you on the Carnival Legend.
Right.
And I am with my sweet husband, my pastor, my enabler of all good things, Pastor Jerry Ruiz.
Hello.
And today we are going to be focusing on something that is kind of near and dear to our hearts. A couple of the focuses of Everyday Imperfect as the podcast is finding ways to, number one, accept and work through the shortcomings that we have in our daily walk with Christ, because we all have them. And number two, help people better integrate or blend our faith into our everyday life. So in this episode, we are going to look at keeping the faith focus when you are recharging, when you're out of the ordinary, out of your routine, and you're away to recharge. So, Pastor, you have anything to say to introduce this to us real quick?
Well, I think the first thing that we need to notice is everybody needs a recharge.
It's true. Totally true.
I mean, God did not create us to last indefinitely, right? In fact, I heard one person say that you begin to die from the day you're born.
Oh, that's depressing.
It's a little depressing, but it's also, it's physically accurate. But we're simply not created to last. God, in fact, in Genesis, God himself exemplified the value of recharge when he established the Sabbath.
Right. True.
God didn't need to recharge as we need to recharge, but he established a pattern for us because as the creator, he knew our limitations and he knew what we needed.
Absolutely. And we know too, this is point number 2 for us here, there are different levels of recharge.
Yeah.
So we know that there's a daily recharge. What would you suggest would be something that would be like a daily recharge?
Well, that's your spiritual disciplines, Bible reading, meditation, prayer, daily devotions. Those spiritual disciplines are your daily recharge. It's a time that you can mentally refocus or focus on your day and on the as we say, the integration of our faith and function on how we can best demonstrate our faith.
That's your routine type stuff.
It's routine. And that's not saying it's religious.
No.
It's just
the stuff that you do
established
enough. Yeah.
Yes, it's prioritized.
There you go. Yeah. We also need a weekly recharge. Right? So things like taking your Sabbath, going to your worship service on, for most of us, it'll be a Sunday, but whatever day it is. Fellowshipping is a way of Sabbathing.
Absolutely.
Don't you agree? And I think that's really, really important, a way that a lot of us kind of overlook sometimes.
Yeah. Well, we live in an age where we microwave our meals and where we order Grubhub rather than cooking at home. And we have this concept that everything in our life can be delivered.
Mm.
And we apply that to our spiritual life by watching our services on a live stream
Oh, yeah,
or
that's true.
getting all of our church from a television broadcast. And
Or
we
podcast.
or web or yeah, and we devalue or de-emphasize the value of fellowship
Yeah.
because God designed us to be together. He designed us to need each other, and He designed us to benefit each other. And the only way that happens is by face-to-face fellowship.
Yeah, that's true. Hey friend, did you know that it only takes 21 days to create a new good habit? And with that in mind, we've created 3 study journals that we're calling the Habit Series. These are just 21-day study journals, and each of the 3 tackle a different subject. Like for the first one is introducing God so that you know who God is to you. The second one is one I think kind of all of us need, interrupting anxiety. And then the third one is probably my favorite. It's called Mindset Reset. And it helps us to realize who we are according to who God says we are, not who society labels us as. So if you're ready to get started, diving into His Word just a little bit at a time, creating a new healthy habit, get started here. Go to the show notes and click on the Amazon link to find our study journals there.
God designed us to be together. He designed us to need each other, and He designed us to benefit each other. And the only way that happens is by face-to-face fellowship.
Yep, that's true. Now, I want to take a little side note here. We're talking about different levels of recharge. And we talked about the daily recharge and the weekly recharge. And I think this is going to be a perfect place to kind of input something that I discovered recently, and that's through Christine Kane's podcast for leadership.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's called Life and Leadership. I may be wrong, but we will link that in the show notes. But this last summer, she did a let me say the summer of 2024, in case you're listening to this podcast well beyond. But Chris Kane did a podcast series on the art of the Sabbath, of taking a Sabbath. And I learned quite a bit in that. For example, one of the things is a Sabbath for me is not going to look the same as taking a Sabbath for someone who maybe is not in ministry, or someone who maybe is a first responder who has to work 24 hours on and 48 hours off.
Right.
You know, that kind of Sabbath, our Sabbath will not be the same. Sometimes we have to choose to have Sabbath moments instead of a full day, but we still have to prioritize keeping those moments set aside to make sure we have those times to recharge, not just, physically, but also spiritually and mentally as well.
Right.
So, and again, we'll put that link for Chris Kane's podcast in the show notes so that you'll be able to find that and gain some wisdom from that as well. It's amazing. You don't want to miss it. But the 3 different levels of recharge that we wanted to bring to your attention today, we have the daily recharge, the weekly recharge, and this one's kind of a special one.
This is where we are.
Yes, the full battery recharge.
Yes. Back in the early days of rechargeable batteries would imprint. For instance, if you only recharged it to 50% every day, eventually it would only charge up to 50%. You wouldn't be able to charge it fully. Yeah. And what you would have to do is you would have to completely drain the battery till it was completely dead, and then recharge it again.
Right.
And it would recharge to full capacity. Some of us live lives at 50% recharge. And it is necessary and healthy mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually to have a time to unplug and allow ourselves to fully recharge. And for most of us, especially in ministry, that looks like exactly what we're doing this week. We're taking a week of vacation. And when I say vacation, it's sort of a working vacation because we have set aside this time intentionally to work on some plans and goals for our family and for our church and our ministry. But it is our time of absolute full battery recharge.
Mm-hmm. Now, having said that, this vacation being a recharge, it doesn't have to, just like a Sabbath, it doesn't have to look the same for
No.
one person as it does another. For some, it's going to be a staycation where
Yeah.
you're just plugging away at home and recharging your battery with the Lord right there in your prayer closet.
Mhm.
Or it might be like us, and where you can get away and not have your phone notifying you of every little thing that is going on in your hometown.
Yeah. Well,
So,
if you keep the focus right,
mm-hmm.
let me put it into a food analogy.
Oh goodness.
A meal is essentially a method of delivering calories to our body to burn as energy.
Mm-hmm.
So there are many, many different types of meals. There are meals that are protein bars that are a full meal. There are meals that are three-course meals with fine dining. And as long as you have the essential element of the calorie,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter what the meal looks like. And if you can boil this recharge down
Yeah.
into its essential elements, what do I need to receive?
Mm.
You can apply those calories of recharge in any scenario.
Absolutely. So we are learning that everyone needs a recharge.
Yep.
We have found out there are different levels of recharge.
Yep.
Now, number 3, vacations are great times of ministry
Yeah.
to others. Now, Pastor Jared, you came up with this one, so you tell me about it.
Well, you have to understand that recharge doesn't mean stopping everything. You don't have to stop ministry in order to recharge your spiritual batteries.
Mm-hmm.
Because honestly, a great way to recharge and energize your passion for ministry is to minister in a different scenario, in a different way to different people. When I went through ministerial internship program, one of the things that they stressed to us was if you get caught up in the monotony of ministering to your local church and you just feel the walls closing in, the best thing you can do to recharge your passion is to go and visit another church. Take an intentional time to go and to be in ministry at another church. And it would actually energize you for ministry at your home church. And this is one of the ways that we recharge on a vacation. We'll just put it in that context. Is that it's not a time to leave your faith behind. Vacation isn't a vacation from your dedication.
Right. It
Okay,
doesn't change who you are.
it's right. And as ministers, it's not a vacation from your vocation. So it's not a time to leave faith behind. Vacations give us opportunities that we wouldn't have any other way. It puts us in contact with people that we may never see any other way.
Mm-hmm.
And it is an opportunity
Mm-hmm.
for God to put the people in our path who need what we have to give. I call them God-timed encounters.
Mm-hmm.
God is a great orchestrator.
Mm-hmm.
And the spiritual impact of ministry to a person can actually be naturally increased by a God-timed encounter. If they realize God is orchestrating this,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be eloquent words from your mouth that creates impact. It's God's involvement
Amen. Yes.
that creates impact. So when you're in a time of recharge, it's important to look for the people who need the love that God gave you. Okay, God didn't give us His love to keep. God gave us His love to share. Right? So we need to look like Jesus did. We need to look on people and have compassion.
Yeah.
And we had, like last night, we had dinner with Chuck and Kate, our good friends, who you'll hear on the podcast sometime. But they were talking about looking around at situations and circumstances on the ship and trying to see people with
Mm-hmm.
Jesus's eyes of compassion
Yeah.
and trying to look at them and say, okay, how could I speak life into their situation?
Mm-hmm.
What could I do to bring joy to them in this moment? What could I do to share the love of Christ with them?
Hey y'all, I just wanted to take a second to tell you about something that seems almost unreal to me. My first book, Beyond the Shadows of Doubt, Imperfect Faith for Perfect Peace, is available now on Amazon. My editor calls it a memoir and spiritual growth book, but I call it a testimony. Some of you know I went through a really dark and deeply hopeless time with my faith. And yes, it was while my husband and I were still ministering. And this book is what the Lord taught me about real faith in Him. I knew I wasn't the only one wondering if everything I believed and everything I built my life on was a lie or if it was even worth it. So my hope is this, that the lessons I learned as I was digging deep within myself and the Word is what will help someone else get through their own times of doubt and heavy questioning. We'll put the link for it in the show notes. And get your copy today, and maybe grab a copy for a friend.
What could I do to share the love of Christ with them?
Right.
And how impactful could I be? And I think that's not just a good exercise. It is a good
It's a good
uh,
way of life,
it's a
honestly.
good way of life, and it's a good filling station for your spirit.
Right. And I think, like Pastor Jerry mentioned, we will be having Chuck and Kate here on the show with us soon, because they have some amazing insights that have honestly helped us, and we want to make sure that we can share that with you. But
Absolutely.
the way Chuck and Kate do things too is that really is part of their everyday life.
Yes.
So coming on vacation so that they can recharge themselves with their children, that's not putting them out. And
No.
one thing too, I want to make sure that you guys who are our loyal listeners that we love so very much, we are not telling you that you need to go and book a missions trip as your vacation.
No.
No, two separate things. What we're saying is you need to live as a Christian on your vacation. An example of that, if I can just give it real quick, is one of our first cruises. We've been on many, many cruises, but one of the cruises that we went on in the early days was with my best friend and her husband and her sister and my sister, and we just had a group with us, and we decided to go and be a part of the audience for the Love and Marriage show. And then we wound up being chosen as one of the contestants. And it was because after we you tried out in this little silly show as with a kissing contest. And so Jerry went to kiss me as passionately as he does.
Now remember, this is a rated G show.
That's all we're going, because you didn't do anything more, thankfully. It would have embarrassed the mess out of me. But whenever we got done like auditioning or whatever, people were clapping, and all this, and they were clapping well enough on their own. But then our friend says, and he's a pastor.
Oh yeah.
Which was so great because especially in the early days, it was like, okay, I'm a Christian everywhere I go, but people don't necessarily need to know I'm a pastor everywhere I go.
I'm not the pastor to everyone on the ship, but I am a Christian.
Yes,
when I'm on the ship.
So at first we were like, yeah, well, let's see what happens. And sure enough, everybody who was in the audience, and then people who wound up watching the replays later, because in those days they reshowed it later in the week, they would recognize Jerry. Are you that pastor? Are you the pastor? Yeah. Are you the pastor? And so of course Jerry's like, well, yes, ma'am, I am. And several times he actually had the chance to provide wise biblical counsel to people because of how he lived his life. Because
I counseled more marriages that week than I did the whole rest of the year.
Yes, so that was definitely, it wound up being a ministry trip.
It did.
But because of the way that he lived his life, that we did not shy away from from being the Christian or the pastors on this trip, that we weren't trying to hide anything. We didn't come on the trip ready to get drunk and act hooligan style. We just were who we were, and people recognized that's the guy I can go to for help because of who we represented.
Yeah, and I think it bodes well here to mention that in order to be that light that you just spoke of, we don't really need to seek to create spectacle. We don't. We do not have to get people's attention to get God's attention.
Yeah.
And we just need to be willing to be real with people. We're not putting on a show for someone. We're just simply being God's hands, feet, and sometimes mouth.
That's true. So, moral of that story, be who you are, which is God's kid.
Yep.
Be a child of God everywhere you go. And
That's it.
He will put people in place for you to minister to, which will also minister to you. It'll recharge your battery on your vacation. So, number 4, vacations are great times of ministry to yourself and your spouse.
Yes, they are.
That's right. So we definitely don't want to miss the forest for the trees. You have to make sure that you aren't so busy looking for ways to minister to others that we forget that our spouse is our other. I like to say it this way, that my first ministry is to my husband.
Yes.
And if I'm so busy looking for other people to minister to be a light to, and looking for this and looking for that, I will forget and neglect my husband's needs. And that is not what recharging our spiritual battery together is all about.
That's right. There in a ministry context, which is my forte, there are two people, two groups of people, two categories that are often overlooked in ministry context, and that is the family in front of you, and the man in the mirror.
Oh.
There are so many times that we get so caught up in having to be the minister, air quotes, to everyone else, that we sometimes, not intentionally, but we miss the forest for the trees, that metaphor, because we're looking over what's in front of us to try to identify what's beyond us. And I think these times of intentional recharge are absolutely great times to focus on how can I best minister to my spouse? How can I best be ministered to? What is it I would counsel myself about?
Wow.
What spiritual advice would I give myself?
I feel like we could do a whole podcast on just that.
There's a
one
podcast
thing.
in that. Oh yeah, there's a podcast.
Yeah. So obviously there are many, many ways to maintain a faith focus during times of recharge, but none of them are going to happen arbitrarily, as my husband says. You have to be intentional with this, and it doesn't mean that it has to be labor intensive either.
No, it just takes intentional time.
You're right. You're right. You just have to be willing to be intentional as well.
Well, you have to be willing to give something up in order to gain something else.
That's true. Tell us more about that.
Well, see, if we keep our focus, the problem that most of us face with these times of daily, weekly recharge, and we see them as a sacrifice of time. We see them as, I'm giving something up. But what we need to focus on is the spiritual gains, not the perceived losses, because honestly, the perceived losses are just perception. They're not literal. We are not losing anything by intentionally giving time to recharge and to minister to ourselves, our spouses, and to others. There is absolutely no loss there. It is all gain. But we oftentimes think of, well, I could be doing fill in the blank right now, instead of having to take this half hour of time. Honestly, the investment is worth the return.
Amen.
The ROI on recharging and ministering to yourselves and your family is immense.
Mm-hmm.
God's greatest rewards are held for those who are seeking Him with their whole heart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if you are seeking Him with your whole heart, you won't see it as a burden.
Amen. Amen. And just a quick note here is, when you're having this time of intentionality, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are resources out there to follow, easy to follow devotionals, even courses and good things like that for corporate use, for family use, or personal use.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll definitely put a link to some of those in our show notes. But I'm going to specifically make sure we put one to the series that we are going to be doing on our vacation this week. And so what that means is for the next few weeks, you guys are going to get to come along with us on our spiritual recharge journey that we're going through on this vacation. And you're going to get to kind of just have that fly on the wall look into the devotional and discussion that we do, and in the hopes that as we grow, you guys can grow with us, because let's face it, you've become part of our family at this point.
Right. Because we don't want just to talk about things, we want to exemplify them. And I think this peek behind the curtain in a minister's family, what does a minister's family look like on vacation? How do they recharge spiritually? It may help you to understand it's not as difficult as you think it is. It's not as burdensome as you think it is.
Right.
In fact, what we did is we selected a 5-day devotional on heritage and legacy, and that's what we did. It took a few minutes out of a day. I mean, it was a very minimal ask.
Yes, for sure.
But I believe the insights that we have gained over these 5 days is immense. So we're gonna let you along for the ride. The next 5 weeks will probably be a little shorter in context because our devotions are not 5 hours long, believe it or not. But we want to keep
because we
you
do
along
have
for the
things to do on this vacation.
Yeah, I mean, we recharge more than just our spirit, man. We recharge our bellies. We
Oh my
recharge
gosh! Listen,
minds. We recharge, all of that. But anyway, we're glad to have you along for the ride.
We are, and thank you guys for joining us. If you haven't already, make sure you go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating, and please leave us a review. That helps to get the word out about our mission, which is helping people understand that it is okay to be imperfect together, because we serve a perfect God, and God knows we were made from dirt. Amen. So we will see you guys, and hopefully you guys will hear us the next podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on our special vacation podcast. Amen.
Amen.
Hey friend, thank you so much for joining us on today's podcast. Check the show notes for any links and resources we may have mentioned, and please do me a big favor and leave us 5 stars on the podcast platform where you found us. And if you can't give us 5 stars, tell us how we can get those 5 stars. That's how other people can find out about us and the message we're trying to get out, that it's okay for us to be imperfect in our everyday life, because we follow Jesus Christ, who is perfect for us. Also, if you'll go to the Buzzsprout link in the show notes, you can leave me fan mail. That's basically where you tell me what you think about the show and make suggestions for upcoming topics. I can't wait to hear from you. Now, please share this imperfect episode with your imperfect friends, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode releasing soon.